So hello all, my name is Kathayoon Khalil. I am the Director of Engagement for Zoo Advisors, and I'm really excited to be co-hosting this panel today with Jackie Ogden. Jackie, do you want to wave hello and give you a brief intro?
Sure. Jackie Ogden, so Senior Advisor with Zoo Advisors, been in the zoo and aquarium world for a really long time. I'm sort of retired and now getting to do really fun stuff like working with Zoo Advisors.
Awesome. So today we have a really, I'm excited about this panel, a really interesting panel talking about those of us in the field who are kind of that pre-ELDP version of emerging leaders. So we originally conceived of this idea because we were thinking about this idea of a spectrum of engagement in the zoo and aquarium profession, and those of us, and I'm including myself in that, who've been in this field for a while, who see themselves in this field for a very much longer while, but who are kind of in this space where we're not quite at the same level as some of the other panelists that we often have, who are there's a fly in my face, who are at that stage where they can see themselves being a director in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, that kind of thing. And so we wanted to tap this maybe maybe new group of people and hear from some familiar faces and some fresh faces as well, as we discuss some of our ups and downs and excitements and trepidations and pitfalls and successes. I'm selfishly excited because this is an excuse to get together a panel of some of the smartest people I know. So I'm thrilled for you all to get to hear from them. So I would love our panelists to introduce themselves, because this is the weird virtual space. I'll just call on you, and you can introduce yourself and tell everyone what you would like them to know about you. So I'll start with Shervin since I see him on my screen.
Okay, I'm Shervin Hess. I'm at the Oregon Zoo and I'm the Wildlife Advocacy Program Manager here. So it's sort of the nexus of conservation and communications.
Awesome. And Marc Heinzman.
Hi, everybody. I'm Marc Heinzman. I'm the zoological curator at Northwest Trek Wildlife Park, where I've been for about 6 years and have been doing this sort of thing in our field for, I guess, just about 15 years now.
Awesome. Curtis Bennett, I don't see you, but I think you're here.
Hey, hi, everyone. Curtis Bennett, the Director of Equity and Community Engagement at the National Aquarium in Baltimore, Maryland. And also one of the current co-chairs for the Association of Zoos and Aquariums Diversity Committee.
Jasmine Williams. Jasmine, are you here yet?
I did not see her when I searched.
I'll text her. Natali.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Rogers, the Director of Learning and Evaluation here at the Tennessee Aquarium, and I've been in this field now for about 15 plus years. Excited for the discussion today.
Julia.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julia Klum. I'm the Graphics and Exhibits Manager at Zoo Miami. So I am in charge of our graphics department for all of our signage in the zoo, our exhibits department that has our traveling exhibits and the Conservation Action Center, and then also the interpretive messaging for the zoo. I have been here for about 10 years in various different roles and have been in my current position for about 7 years.
Awesome. Jasmine has been texted, so when she joins us, we'll let her introduce herself as well. Oh, there she is. On cue. Oh, Jasmine, is that you? Seattle Aquarium. While she gets settled, Jackie, do you want to kick us off with our first question?
Sure. So we have a series of questions that we are going to ask our esteemed panelists. And then we're hoping at the end to have some time for additional questions, and I'll also be monitoring the chat. So if people want to throw questions in there, we can share them with our group. So So we're going to start with a really, really important question. And that is, when you think about our zoo and aquarium world today, there's been a lot of, well, there's always a lot of conversation, but I think increasing conversation over the past few years about, what do zoos and aquariums look like in 30 years? And so I know that you bright people have thought about this, have think about this. Okay, so I'm apparently not one of the bright people. I'm old. You've thought about this, and we would love to get your thoughts. So I'm going to start with Shervin, and then we're going to go through the group, and I'm going to ask you all to add on but not repeat what others have said. So Shervin, to you.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. So that'll be 2051. I will have been retired for 7 years. That's the exciting news. But it's kind of scary because I read the world population projection will be 9.7 billion. So that's going to be an additional 2 billion people. World will be hotter. Biodiversity crisis will intensify, which means our work is going to be more urgent. So I think broadly, more of our work is going to be devoted to conservation. I think also by 2051, if not every person in our community has equal access to the zoo, we're failing. Advocacy, I think, will be mainstream. Broadly, we're going to have to be more bold when it comes to wildlife-friendly policy and action. I think our species collection will still be global, but probably more climate appropriate. And on grounds, I think technology is going to play an important role in connecting people with habitat and field work through different immersive experiences.
Nice. Thank you, Shervin. That was great. So now, Marc, I'll pick on you.
Sure. So, the first thing that I think of course, just relates to my primary area of focus, which is the animals that we have here and the care that we provide to them. So, thinking ahead into 30 years from now, with where we are with the focus on animal welfare that we have right now, that's only going to continue to grow and expand. And I think that we'll see more and more science be incorporated into that, and likewise more and more technology incorporated into that, which really excites me in a lot of ways. That I think there are a lot of things that we rely on, kind of the art of zookeeping, to determine if an animal is doing well, like for the keepers to be able to interpret what they're seeing just based on some subtle changes in an animal's behavior. Or what they're eating or what they're outputting, and I think we're going to see a lot of technology that takes that art away and automates a lot of that process, which is great for the animals, but it also will mean a pretty different shift in the day-to-day role of an animal keeper. And that's not to say we're going to need less animal keepers. It's just that their job is going to change quite a bit on certain things. So to me, that's really interesting to ponder what that will look like as some of those more routine tasks become automated, and we have technology that assesses how your animal's moving and what their body temperature is like, and what the fecal cortisol levels are like before you even get in the morning to see what your animal's doing. So I think that'll be really different, really interesting. And then I was also thinking about our facilities overall. And as we have continued to build new enclosures, build new guest experiences, they've become much more elaborate, much more immersive in really interesting and exciting ways. And I think we're going to continue to see a trend with that, in that we're going to get to a certain point where we can only make our exhibits so immersive and so engaging, because there's always going to be some level of, we can't fully immerse people because safety reasons, just the ability to create artificial things that seem real. And likewise, I think we'll start seeing a shift more towards a focus on premium experiences for our visitors, things for our community to engage with our facilities and our organizations in much more involved in complex ways than just coming to the zoo on a Saturday afternoon to look at the animals and then leaving. So whether that be overnight experiences, things that are only tangentially related to the animals, but are still related to our missions overall, that get people involved in new ways, in more complex ways with our facilities than we've had up to this point. I think that's the trend we're going to continue to move towards.
Yeah, I love that. And I would agree with everything that you said. I'm so curious to see what that more complex engagement looks like. And so Curtis.
Or, just to start off with the conservation piece, I think it's also about the way in which we approach that conservation work, and it's the way that we think about that work, and especially the holistic nature and the intersection of conservation work with the work that we want to continue doing in equity and justice, the community engagement work, the education work, how that is all being centered and being well integrated within the way that we do that conservation work is going to be really critical. Again, these are all topics, these are all pillars that are all intrinsically connected, and they have to be activated in that way as such, for us to increase and enhance that relevancy and relatability of who we are and what we do. And then I think about just in general being very flexible and adaptable as institutions. For us, in order to truly stay relevant, to stay connected in a meaningful way, that ability to pivot where we need to really meet people where they are in terms of what those opportunities for engagement, what are the expectations that those community residents, members, our stakeholders will have of us, and our ability to really meet them where they are to enhance that relevancy. And then, I think the most important piece out of all of this is really looking internally and thinking about the cultures that we continue to create and foster and maintain within our institutions. And we're starting to see that now, right? Our workforce is expecting different things of our institutions. We're in the midst of a great resignation across the space, right? And we've got to continue to make sure that we stay flexible and adaptable to the needs of our people. And that might mean thinking about how positions shift, how that impacts the work that we do, to truly make sure that our needs as people are being met and being centered in a really intentional way.
Love that. I just saw something recently that I can't remember if it's Forbes or Fortune, but it was something like that. When they were asked what the most important quality a leader could have, they said empathy. That would not have been true 3 years ago. Absolutely not. So thank you, Curtis. Natalie.
Yeah, I would say definitely as we're thinking about how things are going to change, we have to really focus on how we engage within the community and understanding the family structure and dynamics have changed or already changing, and anticipating what those changes will be. Single family households are on the rise, the increase of diversity within our populations. So how do we meet those families where they are, knowing that those things are changing and making sure how we engage with them is in a relevant manner? I think it also goes down to what Curtis is also saying with staffing. Staffing is very important, understanding what the needs of the staff is, because once again, diversity does matter, and understanding when individuals get here. How are we looking at succession planning? One of the things you hear often is this is what we've done, this is how we do things, but sometimes we forget along the way that times have changed and we need to change with them. And if not just change with them, we need to make sure that we're changing even before we're almost kind of seeing what the direction of the times are going and make those adjustments as necessary. So I really think it comes down to how we engage within the community, which will also play into our staffing, our succession planning, our conservation projects, our education programs, all of that in our memberships.
Completely agree. And last but not least, because sadly Jasmine is ill and that was why she's not joining us. So Julia.
I agree with everything that everyone has said so far. I think technology will take a much more primary role in a lot of aspects of what we do when it comes to the public and exhibitry, animal management. I'm hoping that this will be able to give us also a more complete and immediate understanding of the guests that are coming into our parks every day. I think I agree with Curtis that we need to look internally. We need to make sure that our staff have what they need. I think the pandemic was a really interesting way to really assess our staff. And I think that most institutions did that and really looked at, like, they were forced to, really, we were all forced to really take a hard look at our staff and realize that even coming out of the pandemic, people are interested in different things now. More people are interested in their home life and family life. I think that the pandemic really showed people what was important to them. And I think that reflects in our staffing now. But I also think we need to look externally. I think of even my own institution, Zoo Miami, and how much we've changed in the past 30 years. We were Crandon Park Zoo before we were Zoo Miami, and we were very small. And honestly, it's a park that I today don't know that I would want to work at. You know, it's one of those things that we have come so far in this industry in just 30 years. And we at Zoo Miami have moved into more open spaces. We're blessed with a lot of property, so we're able to have large open exhibitry where animals feel that the people feel that the animals are in their somewhat of a natural habitat. That has been amazing for us. And to think of what that would look like 30 years from now, I think is really interesting also, and incorporating people into that immersive, natural space, but then also understanding that we need to look external too. We need to make sure that we're walking the walk when we talk about being an education and conservation institution. If we don't do that now, zoos may not exist in the same format 30 years from now. And so I think that the change in rhetoric and the change in the ideologies that have happened over the past even decade have been really beneficial to zoos in general and aquariums. And I think that we need to continue those discussions. We need to scream from the mountaintops what we do on a daily basis, because I feel like we can do more of that.
That is a perfect segue to what I want to ask about next. And I'm going to give you two options for this question, and I'll tell you why. So, really hot issue, right? How do we talk to people who are not fully bought into the zoo and aquarium world, you know, from extremists all the way to the skeptical? What do you want us to be saying? What do you wish they knew about the work that we did? Now, I know I get tired of answering that question sometimes, so I'm going to give you another option. If you are tired of answering that question, or if the emotional burden of that can, you know, get you real riled up, that's okay. I would love to know, what besides those, like, you know, zoo skeptics, zoo antis, do you think we should be proactive about, thinking about, concerned about, even just thinking about in the next few years? And I will open it up for anyone to start on that.
I'll go ahead and.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead, Julie.
Maybe I'll just continue a little bit onto mine. I feel that over the past decade, you know, we've seen films come out like Blackfish, Tiger King. The second season just launched yesterday.
There's a second season?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yep, it aired last night for the first time. And there's the conservation game. There's all of these different documentaries. Our detractors do a really, really good job at screaming from the rooftops. They play at people's heartstrings, and they're emotional and they're empathetic, and they have an amazing story to tell, whether or not it's fact. And I think that over the years, we haven't done a great job at screaming what we do from the mountaintops. And that's what I'm hoping that we'll be able to come together as an AZA institution, right? Like, or not even AZA, just all, I feel like a lot of this messaging needs to come from more than just our zoos. It's so much more of a pervasive problem, because films like Blackfish and Tiger King are on Netflix and everyone watches Netflix. Like, how do we get our stories on Netflix? I feel like we're going to need a Netflix pull at some point to really to pull us up there. But I feel like in the upcoming years, zoos will have to pull together, and maybe that's an AZA thing, maybe that's, but we're going to need more than one voice. We're going to need a collective voice to explain what we do. And I think we've come a long way over the past couple of years with the shows that are airing on Animal Planet, National Geographic, that are great, but I don't think they have as wide an audience as the other ones. And I'd really like to see zoos come together and say, you know what, we're gonna pull this together and we're gonna have a joint message. Like maybe it's all the Southeast, or maybe it's the West Coast, or maybe it's AZA. I don't know what the answer to that is, but we do amazing things, and just it's hard getting that information out. And especially if we are getting it out, we're getting it out internally. We're getting it out once you're at the zoo. Look at this amazing conservation work that we're doing. But it's the ones that are not coming that we need to find out how to tap into, and what exactly it is that they're hesitant about. Because I feel like there's a lot of them they're that movable middle that are much easier to sway, and there's some that will never be able to change their opinion, and that's fine. But accessing those people and finding out from them, like, what exactly is it? Let's do some more research on that too, and put all of our collective voices together to show who we are.
Thank you.
I'm going
Marc?
to add on that piece, if that's okay. I completely agree with you, Julia. We do not really tell our story the way I feel that we should, to make sure we're connecting with the skeptics, the critics. But I think it's not just what we do, but it's the why and behind what we're doing. I think that is the piece that a lot of times is missing of, okay, when we're trying to get guests here, or we're trying to interact with the communities, we might kind of say what in some ways, but the why sometimes gets lost in translation. And I think that's one of the biggest disconnects for some of our audiences.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just, Julia and Natalie both kind of led perfectly to kind of where I was going to go with this too. So I think we're all of like minds here. The first thing that I was thinking about is that I feel like we really need to come up with a better way to differentiate what's a good zoo versus a bad zoo. Because right now, some people hear the word zoo and they think of Tiger King, they think of the Tiger King facility, whereas, we're very different than they are in a lot of ways. And, it's hard to just break that mental model that some people have, and to be able to define what's different there and a way to do that. Now, of course, I say that, but I don't have the answer for how we can differentiate between the two in a simple way. Certainly there are things that we can do that can help differentiate us, but of course, as humans, we all tend to want to put things into patterns and boxes and sort things in simple ways that way. I also feel like we really need to work hard on establishing kind of a universal standard for assessing the welfare of our animals, so that when my facility says our animals have good welfare and here's how we've assessed that, and another facility says that, it's backed up by good science, and it's a way that we can demonstrate that it's actually true, and that we're not just saying like, no, things are fine, don't worry about it. And so as we continue to advance this, science of animal welfare in our facilities, that we really formalize it in such a way that it's, it can be applied in a lot of different ways. And, if we all remember how we learned the scientific method when we were in our early school years, that it's reproducible, that someone else can come in and say, let me see the data. Okay, yeah, I understand what you're doing there. And related to animal welfare, this may be a little bit more controversial, but I think some of our facilities, we need to have some tough conversations about, can we keep all the animals that we keep in our facilities well? Is it the best idea to have polar bears in all the places we have polar bears, for instance, and instead of kind of having a hubris of, well, we've had this animal for decades and they're still here, really acknowledging that there is in fact a difference between an animal surviving and an animal thriving. And so, having those conversations about, can we truly feel good about what we're doing? And if the answer is yes, that's fantastic. And, I would hope that the answer be yes. But if the answer is no, that we acknowledge that the answer is no, and we make changes so that we can feel good about what we do, and so that we can, truly hold up the work that we do to our critics and say we are bulletproof, essentially, and here's the information to prove that. And like Julia said, we may not always be able to persuade everyone, because there are some people who are just don't like the concept of animals under human care, no matter how well they're cared for, even if they live better lives than we do. But for most people, if we can bring them along with actual tangible evidence, I think that's the key there. And Kathayoon, if I can continue to pontificate for a minute to answer the second part of your question. Some of this was, my thoughts were already mentioned earlier. Curtis touched on this, about how we're kind of in this great resignation movement, and how we, are all guilty. All of our facilities are guilty of, relying on position scarcity to create demand for our positions. But I bet there's a lot of people on this call right now that in the last year have had a dearth of applications for positions that we've never had that before. And that's, we've experienced that ourselves here too. We're keeper positions, and it's like, hey, we've got an opening. Usually we, have a wealth of applications. And this time it's like, is anybody going to apply for this thing? We really need to get this job filled. And, I think that what we've all been through for the last 2 years has made a lot of people reevaluate, what is worth it. And, if paying low wages and minimal benefits, but the job is rewarding, so therefore people want it, maybe that a lot of people feel like a rewarding job isn't worth all these other things that they go through. And so we need to take a look at that as well.
Absolutely.
And just to build off of that too, and even connect the storytelling to the workforce piece, because like even I think about my journey into this space, I don't know that I would have been in the position I'm in now with the aquarium had it not been for the thinking critically about the channels of which the stories are coming through. My perception of the industry before actually talking to someone, and this was not what was on a social page, this was not what was on a website, because those are echo chambers. And we've got to look beyond those echo chambers around how we're engaging, what types of conversations we're having, because that's also connected towards attraction from a workforce standpoint, and making sure that we're telling those stories in a meaningful way that bring people into some of these spaces in a meaningful way. But then tying it into, again, this idea of, how are we retaining? How are we folks in our industry? How are we, supporting growth even beyond or outside of our industry, through all the different work that we do? And pay equity is a huge part of that. Like, we cannot ignore that conversation. Like, that has to be centered moving forward, because there are gaps that exist. And, again, like, mission and vision are critical, but last time I checked, those things don't pay your bills. So we've got to be thinking very critically about and having those types of conversations. And it's not an easy answer by any means. It's complex, but we have to continue to have the dialogue.
Absolutely. Shervin, I saw you unmute. Would you like to chime in, or are you good?
Sure. Yeah, I'll make it quick because I agree with everything. And there's also amazing conversation happening in the chat here about listening. Mm-hmm. So as somebody who works in the part of the country with the lowest approval rating for zoos, and having a spouse who's on the fence about zoos, I think about this a lot. And I think we have to, this anti-zoo sentiment can be very triggering, but listening is critical, because these organizations, although there sometimes is misinformation, they're also keeping zoos and aquariums honest. They're helping us evolve. Mm-hmm. So we have to listen. The other thing with regard to storytelling is, I think we need to be more sophisticated and strategic about visual storytelling. We need to be doing more show, don't tell, because animal welfare is, of course, what they're hammering this on. And so there are ways to show that. I think it comes across as more authentic.
Thank you.
I completely agree with you, Shervin. It's a lot about listening, and it's about not being defensive either, right? It's really listening to what they have to say and thinking critically about ourselves, and are we really showing people what what we need to be showing them. But it really does take, you have to take the wall down to be able to hear that information, even if it's not nice to hear. But you're right, they keep us honest. I think I really liked that.
So this is such a great conversation. And, I've been thinking, well, a lot about just sort of the state of our world and how, Shervin, to use your word, so many things trigger me right now. And it's then very hard for me to listen and be able to take it in and to really try to have compassion for where other people are coming from. So I'm just loving this conversation. So thank you. So this is like just a kind of a basic question, but a great question. And I'm really curious for all of you, what keeps you in the field? Because, like life isn't easy. Things are challenging. Things have been really challenging over the last 2 years. So, what keeps you going? What is your why? And anybody can start.
I'll start, I guess. There are little wins every week that energize me, but when you're working conservation, if I spent too much time thinking about the trends with habitat loss and biodiversity loss and climate impacts, I'd probably just stay in the fetal position at the bottom of my bed, right? So it's what keeps me in it is actually what I suspect keeps a lot of us in it. And we love nature. We love wildlife. We want to live our love of wildlife. It's not enough for wildlife to be just something we do on the side. I do think I'm making a difference. I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't. But what I'm trying to say is that I really do it because it brings me joy, and that joy informs the way I do my work. And it's kind of how we connect with our communities, because they're incredibly diverse, economically, ethnically, politically. They all have this one thing in common, and that's they love animals. So it's not necessarily the conservation that they respond to, it's the animals. So tapping into that, being able to connect them to a greater cause, that's what keeps me in it. And I have a lot of fun doing it, like probably too much fun doing it.
Oh, there's no such thing as too much fun. Who's next?
I can say probably the biggest driver for me is working for a mission-driven organization, or the type of work we do is mission-driven. To me, that gives me so much more just motivation and job satisfaction than I try to think of the opposite of working for a corporation that the ultimate goal is to just increase profits by X% next year, and it's like, oh, who cares, like that, so working for an organization where, why we come to work every day is to help people feel as passionate about wildlife and conservation as we all feel. That's awesome. What a goal to have every day when you get out of bed, is that's the thing you're trying to accomplish. And, because of that, you get a work experience that's unlike any other, as opposed to, I was going to try and give an example, but I'm afraid I might accidentally insult someone's job, so I won't do that. But working in this environment where you get to go and just see animals sometimes, regardless of what you do, like how cool is that? Like that doesn't exist in so many other fields, and we're just lucky to be in these roles to be able to do that type of thing. It's incredible. The fact that we're not. Our goal is to just get people to care, not get people to buy more, or to be better capitalists, or to consume more, or things like that. It's great.
I agree. Who else gets to go and see rhinos on their lunch break? Like that's pretty awesome. For me, all of the above, right? All the same. But my degree is in fine arts, and I thought I'd be an art curator. And so I went into that field and realized that I hated every second of it. It was just so boring, and everything was about money, and everything was about who you knew, and like all of those things. And it just didn't drive me. And I took a part-time job at the zoo, and was just like, well, I'll work here. Both of my sisters are zookeepers. So I was like, okay, I'll try it at the zoo, and realized that if I had any passion for art, I had way more for animals and for conservation and for getting people to to understand the stories behind the animals and make the connections with animals. And then I found out there's an art department in zoos, and I was like, what? This is great. And like, there's nothing more fulfilling than walking out and like creating signage and walking out and seeing people reading that signage and talking about there's only 400 Sumatran tigers left in the wild, and they're talking about palm oil. And even the exciting part of researching signage, we're doing a focus group right now. We're realizing that no one's actually reading any of the signage that we did in that area, which is fine. Okay, how do we tweak it? That's all exciting too, right? Because you're learning as you do all of those different things, and you get to learn so much about your guests and other people and how they're taking in that information and what they're taking in. All of that is just really exciting about our field. And then also on my lunch break, I can go hang out with Indian rhinos. Like greater one-horned rhinos are my favorite. I can go out and just hang out with them on my lunch break. It's great.
And say for me that I echo everything everyone has said, but you know, that opportunity to make a difference and know that you've made a difference. I think the big piece that keeps me in this field is being challenged and being innovative and working with individuals who might have my same thought patterns, but also those who do not, and the conversations that come out of that. And then also there's power for me from personal experience of being able to educate or provide awareness of this is a career you can do, trying to push more of those equitable pathways to our field. There's so much power in when I go out to a school or I go and interact with people that may look like me and may not, but they see me doing this role and they're like, I never know I knew that I can do this. I think that helps me to understand that I'm making a difference. And then if I'm making a difference in that way, I know I'm hopefully being able to contribute to people being at the table so we can continue these conversations and making the necessary changes that we need to make.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I feel it's the people. I mean, the people in the community here is so passionate, so energized, supportive, right? It's, you know, we all run into walls, we all fall down, and there are people right there to help pull you back up and continue to work collaboratively to really move things forward in a really intentional way. And that's, and for me personally, I've definitely felt that a lot over especially the last 2 years, right? Where it's been an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. And so, and just having those support systems in place just to help you as a person, not even as a professional, just as a person, has been really, really great to have. And then also the constant learning and growth. I'm someone that really thrives in environments that are constantly adaptive and flexible, and like you're being challenged and pushed. Like for me, it's when stagnant happens, that's when I start getting a little antsy. And so that constant growth and learning that's happening, I think is also what is really exciting about this field. And that includes, like, you know, to Natalie's point, you know, from different perspectives, right? I'm a constant learner. So like, I want to be challenged on certain perspectives and certain things because that helps me grow as a person, and that constant dynamic helps us grow as an industry.
I love how you brought it back to the people part of it, Curtis, because I think for me, when I started volunteering at the Oregon Zoo when I was 13 and going through college, like I always had this like imposter syndrome of like, maybe I don't like animals as much as everybody else, but I realized that, I mean, I do, like, I love animals, but like what I really loved is being around people who cared about something more than themselves, right? Who cared about having a meaningful life. And I think that this family, you know, our community is so strong because we all share that innate need to have a meaningful life. So the next question I want to ask is what makes you, the question is, what makes you excited to be a leader in this field? And I want to caveat that by saying we have selected this group because you all self-identify as people who want to be leaders. Leadership is put on a pedestal in our society, and I know that there are a lot of people who don't necessarily see themselves as like going up a leadership chain, and that is okay, and your contributions are valid. And I would love to know, what is it about being a leader that makes you all excited?
I'm happy to start. For me, it starts with, it's the learning, the growth, the humility, the empathy, and really helping to learn from so many others to help move this field forward in a meaningful way. It's also the mentorship. I think we have to tie leadership and mentorship together. That's critical. That ties back into the succession conversation we were having earlier. Because I know I wouldn't be the person or the professional that I am today without the people that took and continue to take so much of their time to pour into me. And I'm so grateful for that. And, for me, it's the best way to say thank you to that is to pay it forward, right? And to constantly make sure that I'm investing in people in that way. And I want to clarify this too, is that I think this also means, you're pouring into people, even if it means that they might be, leaving institutions that we're in, if it means it's for a better opportunity for them. And I look at the person first. It starts with the person. And so constantly supporting them and what their goals are. And I always tell my staff this, like, I'm their biggest fan. I'm their biggest champion that they will ever have. And, I want to continue to see them elevate their voice. I want to continue to see them grow, continue to see them be the people and the professionals that they know they can be. And just so that they know that I'm right there with them to do all that I can to make that happen.
And I completely agree with Curtis. I think for me, it's being able to provide staff with the resources they need to continue to be successful and continue to grow and continue to learn. One of the things for me is I had great leaders at Zoo Atlanta that poured into me things I didn't even realize I knew I wanted to do. And I think that's important sometimes too, is to be able to listen effectively, to understand the individual and hear what they may or may want to do or not want to do, or expose them to certain things they probably have never they even thought of, so they can reach whatever potential or whatever goals they're trying to achieve. I think that's one of the pieces for me, is that listening, that mentorship essentially, and understanding that everyone is an individual and everyone has different needs.
I think one of the things I like best about being a leader, especially a leader in this field, is the communal nature of this field that we're in, and the fact that everyone is so willing to share what they're doing to help other people who they may never even meet at a facility that's all the way across the country. I mean, where we're at right now here talking to each other is a great example that everyone's taking time out of their day to try and absorb from one another. And that's definitely been the case for a lot of these other discussions that we've had recently too, where I've just been like enraptured by hearing from everybody, and that leaders in at one facility are more than willing to make a facility somewhere else have better leaders, really just for no other purpose than to just help. I think that's incredible, and that's something that I love, and it's a big reason why I'm here today. And Curtis mentioned a little bit of this as well before, that we're in a point in the trajectory of our field where we have to innovate. It's kind of an innovate or die situation for all of us, if we want to stay relevant, if we want to stay, kind of above criticism, for the way we operate, we have to continue to innovate. I think we can all recognize that our field has come a long way in the last 30 years. And, 30 years from now, we're probably going to be looking back and going, can you believe we used to do that in 2021? And so to be in a leadership position, to have the opportunity to contribute to that innovation and to kind of help steer us in a positive direction, in a more positive direction than where we are now, and to be able to look back over a career and see a lot of meaningful, impactful change that I was a part of. To me, that's the coolest thing ever.
I was going to say very similar things. The ability of this community to come together, and the transparency that I feel that exists within our community, to be able to just, like, if I have an issue that I'm working, I can send it out on a listserv and get 50 answers to that. And just the willingness to work together and to help each other is a huge drive for me. But then it's also the change of it, right? Like, I agree with Curtis, stagnation is just like, I get real antsy with that too. And the ability for the zoo community to to shift and adapt and to change and to take in that criticism and actually not just, it doesn't just fall on deaf ears for us. I think that we've made that shift, or we are still making that shift. I don't think that we're like all in the right direction yet, but I feel that we, as a community, we have made a huge shift to be able to listen to people more, and to make changes that will benefit us in the future, because that's something that we'll have to do. We will have to listen to people and have to make those changes in order to stay relevant to the next generation and the generation that comes after that. We have to listen to them. And it's really encouraging for me to be part of those kinds of changes, and to like, I'm a young leader at my institution. And so I have a loud voice, I just talk a lot. And to be part of that, to really talk for those upcoming generations and really saying like, we need to listen to these people, we need to, and to bring in their voices, and the voices of some of the people that we may not want to listen to, but we have to. Being part of all of that change really like is exciting for me. And then also the people that believed in me to get to where I am, like all the shifts that has happened since then. There were some amazing people that taught me so many things, and leaders that I looked up to that really believed in me, and pushed me to do more and to do better. I don't know that I would have found that in another field. I feel like that's, I don't know if it's specific to zoos, but I feel that I've heard that same thing from so many people, and how welcoming the community is. I think that's really special.
What they said.
Right. Go for it, Jackie.
Oh, so I know that we're running out of time. So Kathayoon, I think I'm just going to ask one final question, if that's okay, and then I'll turn it over to you to close. So somebody mentioned at the very beginning of this that we have a really nice mixture on this call of people that are younger in the field and people that are less young in the field, like me. And so for those of you that are making your way in our field, what can those of us that have been around for a bit, what can we do to help you?
When I was in the TV world, which was my former life, I had this showrunner tell me something that always stuck with me. She said, be careful about being too good at any one thing, because people are always going to keep you doing that one thing. And so I think a lot of the big challenge for us is getting our leaders to take a chance on us, to take us out of that box, especially if we have ideas about how we can apply that one thing for a greater cause. So I think it's that willingness to be open, to be forward thinking, to break out of the way we've always done things, and to take a chance on the people you believe in.
I completely agree. It's about getting outside of the box of what we've always done, and this is how it is. We wouldn't exist today if we had stayed the way we were 30 years ago. We have to get out of that box. And I think the box is always going to be changing too. And so it's always going to take newer generations to come in to do that. We just happen to be part of this one, but we're going to be there at some point too, where someone is going to push us to get us out of the box, which I think is cool too.
Be accepting of that diversity of thought, that innovation that comes out of that, allowing us that creativity and that innovation. And I'm like Curtis and probably everyone else, I hate being stagnant. I absolutely hate it. When I start to have more of that routine, I'm like, I'm starting to lose my mind. But challenging us in the right way, allowing us that room to try something. If it doesn't work, let's not just say, oh, it didn't work. Well, let's evaluate it. Let's look into why it didn't work. Let's make some changes. Let's make some tweaks. And the other piece I hear, no matter what institution I've been at, is, well, this is how it's always been done. that's okay, but that necessarily might not mean that's also the best practice. Is it the best way of doing things? And let's think outside of that box. I think giving us the freedom and the room to be able to challenge ourselves, because I really think through those challenges comes growth that will eventually just help our industry as a whole. So continue to let us to kind of be free and be creative and innovative. And if some crazy things come out of our mouths, it might be, and that's okay, but there might be some substance to what we're saying within that.
I think we also just need to prioritize development and investment in staff to continue to learn, continue to grow. And it's not the thing that you do when you have time to do it. It's a part of what you do. Because, I think that oftentimes is the struggle, right? I think, and we have to make sure we center development, and that learning and growth is critical. And I think what's also really important here is that there's no one way of leading. And so some of that, coaching is really important. Because we each have individual strengths, gifts, skills, perspectives. And again, there's no one way of doing it. And so to help support people in how they maximize their gifts, their strengths, their skills, their expertise to be the leader that is right for them is really critical. And that takes time. And we have to prioritize it, and we have to invest in it in order to make sure that, people are being able to move up and they're able to take on those challenges that are, coming up within our industry.
I would also add to that, to continue to be champions for us and for our growth. There are a lot of opportunities and experiences that are out there that we probably don't even know exist. And so continuing to be proactive on our behalf to say, hey, there's this thing, or there's this class or this experience that I think would be really beneficial to you, that I would go, that sounds incredible. I didn't even know it existed. Thank you for bringing that up. And so continuing to have that growth mindset on our behalf as we go forward to help us continue to grow. There's a lot to be gained from that.
And one thing I also want to add, because this recently happened with me too, was just sitting, and I'm very grateful to have supervisors who are very much about my personal development and growth. And so, just recently, I talked to them about my willingness and desire to, continue to grow and learn and get to these senior level leadership roles. And the response was, well, let's look at a position that's in that space. Let's look at all the criteria, and then let's figure out a plan for how you build those skills. And that felt so great to have that time and investment and skill building to prepare me, given my interest, that my supervisors were willing to do that and have always been willing to do that. So that's just a really tangible example. And I do that with my staff too. If there's interest in different opportunities, we're going to sit down, we're going to pull descriptions, we're going to pull opportunities, and then develop a plan for how we can create the opportunities to learn those skills.
That was great.
Oh, man.
I made a list of things I need to do, so thank you.
So I guess it's that time when we start to close our conversation. My brain is buzzing with all of these thoughts and ideas. And one thing that is resonating is this idea that leadership is a journey, not a destination. Like so many of the important things that we do, we continue learning and growing along the way, and we're never fully done. And so when I hear all of you talk, I think in addition to that, leadership is not about one person or two people or your individual ambitions. I get really excited about every one of you bringing in experiences and viewpoints and ideas and perspectives. And together we weave together this really rich tapestry wherein leadership is a generation and not just a collection of individuals. And so to that end, I am stoked and cannot wait to spend the next 30 years with all of you in this field, working and pushing and challenging and taking chances and supporting one another. So thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. We hope that you got a lot out of this. We hope that you read the chat, because that was a whole nother fiery, awesome collection of ideas. And we hope that you'll join us next time for our next webinar. Jackie, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I just was thinking in 30 years, I'll be 91. How cool is that? And I'll still be watching you all do amazing things, and I'll be able to see what you have done within the zoo and aquarium world. So I think somebody said this earlier, or maybe it was in the chat, that boy, when you see the talent that we have within our world, it does give you incredible hope. And so now the burden is on your shoulders. Sorry, that's what my generation did to you, I know. But you all are amazing and really appreciate everything that you've shared with us. So, and look forward to having you all on future webinars.
We're going to end this 3 minutes early so that we can all do what we need to do before our next meetings. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to talk to you all soon.